So this morning, I would like to start with something maybe a little bit different, and I would like to show you that I brought something this morning. And I'd like for somebody to tell me what they think that this is. Can anybody tell me? Anybody seen one of these before? Pardon? Medicine bottle, pill bottle, correct? Anybody of these ever been to the doctor and had one of these before? You know, when we're talking about the health message, you know, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about health. And, you know, many people suffer from many different illnesses. You know, I know many people suffer with things like diabetes. Do you know anyone who suffers from diabetes? You guys can raise your hands. I mean, it's okay. I mean, we you know, we're going to be a little interactive this morning, hopefully. How about anybody who's suffering with heart disease? Anybody know? By the way, and I won't be showing that statistic here today, but I might as well just go ahead and tell you. Did you know that in heart disease alone, that it kills worldwide over 8 million people per year? Now, you think about that for a second. You're about 2 hours from New York City, the largest city in the United States, population of about 9 million people. It's pretty much like wiping out that entire city every year. So, do you know people that have heart disease, hypertension, you know, many what we call lifestyle diseases? So I brought this morning because I wanted you to think about this. What if, see, you don't really know my entire background. What if I was a chemist? And what if I had developed a pill that could help someone reverse their diabetes? What if I had made a pill that would help you reverse hypertension or heart disease or cancer? If you believe that was true, and I'm going to tell you, I know everyone in here knows someone or is directly affected by someone who has these illnesses. And if I told you that there was only one pill that I had, there would be a charge to take me over and knock me down and take this pill and give it to your loved one. Because it would be that important to you if you knew it was true. Now, I only put one pill in here. And do you know why that is? It's because I believe that we do have an answer. But the answer, I believe, is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was the great physician, and because he was the great physician, he has given us tools, if you will, to help us along the way. So with that in mind this morning, I would like for you to just kind of, again, think about the health message. I'd like to share it in a different light this morning. Really wasn't planning on saying this, but I will say this. Growing up, I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist. I was raised a clean meat-eating Seventh-day Adventist. And I will tell you that many times I felt like I had been beat over the head about the health message. And I think that's entirely wrong for us to do. The health message should be a message of hope. It should be a message of salvation. You see, a lot of times because we view it in a way of what's being taken away from us, we see it more of a message of bondage. But I believe that this message should be a message of freedom. So until I get my turner, I will have to come back and turn manually this, but that's okay because it was my fault. I thought I had it this morning. I'd like to start with this quote right here. And what we read is, we're told that God has given to every man a work to be done in connection with his kingdom. Now, how many people is that? Every man, right? So you young men sitting in here, does that refer to you? It does. How about the older of us in here? Does that refer to us as well? Yes. We're told that every man has been given this connection. And we're told that it's not supposed to solely depend upon our ministers. Now, why do you think that is? Am I going to get any feedback this morning? You guys going to make... Listen, my translator's here now. I'm from the South. I apologize about that. I know that you guys may have a harder time understanding me because of my English. My wife tells me that she speaks the King's English, and really, I guess I don't speak any of them. But anyway, thank you for going and getting that for me. Let me just plug this in right quick. Okay, we're good? Okay, now I feel a little bit more comfortable here. So now, every man has been given this because of the ministers aren't up to doing this themselves. We talked just a little bit last night. We figure here in East Stroudsburg, there's about 10,000 people. Then you got other cities kind of developed around here. My question is do you think that your pastor can go knock on every one of these doors by himself? He can't. It's just mathematically impossible to do. So that's why every member is supposed to be actively involved. I can remember before getting involved a lot with ministry that I remember I used to be one of the people who would complain, well, the pastor doesn't come see me enough. And maybe you guys, somebody's experienced that thought too. And then I realized in doing this that I have two options. I can either be a part of the problem or I can be a part of the solution. Being part of the solution is for me to go out and do what the minister's also been called to do. And she goes on to say in here that no matter what our occupation, whatever it is, that we are all to be medical missionaries. So it doesn't matter if you're out as an electrician, it doesn't matter if you're a government official, it doesn't matter if you're a physician, it doesn't matter. Whatever your occupation, we are told that we are all to do medical missionary work. Now, this is because this is what Jesus did. Jesus went and he ministered to people. Last night we talked about Christ's method alone that would bring true success in reaching the people. But what did Jesus do? The very first thing that we find that Christ did was that he went to people. He went to them where they were at. Now, I saw out here as we came in this morning that you're having a place where you're able for folks to come out and get clothes if they need them. That is a beautiful ministry, you see. This is what our churches need to be doing. This is part of a different presentation that I give, but you know, the question is that I always ask in churches is, what happens if the doors to your church is closed today? Does anybody in the community know? Do they care? This should be one of our primary focuses as a church. It's not to come and sit here and keep a pew warm for a couple hours during the week. We need to be actively involved in helping people. So this is what Christ did. And we're told that this was our work to be done as well. So we're talking about health. Let's tie this back together. What is health? Well, according to the World Health Organization, that this is the freedom from disease from a state of complete physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being. In other words, it's not just about being physically sick, but it's treating the entire body. This is what they call health. And I found this to be extremely interesting. So what is a government definition of a chronic disease? Well, what they tell us is that this is something that usually happens to someone in their middle ages. Now, what we're finding is that it's actually getting to where people are getting younger and younger. But for the most part, you can say that this is something that happens to people in their middle ages. Now, it's very interesting. They give 3 very distinct reasons why these happen. They say number 1 is the use of tobacco. I'm not saying that they're in this order, but this is 3 that they mention. Physical inactivity, and also a consumption of diets high in saturated fats. Did you realize that that's 3 of the laws that we will be discussing here this morning for Sabbath school? 3 of them. And so it's very interesting. Good morning. Happy Sabbath, brother. How are you this morning? And so we find that these 3, to me, I read this and I think, if, and just if, these are what cause our problems. Listen, I'm not a rocket scientist. I actually know rocket science. Well, not a rocket scientist, an astrophysicist. I know an astrophysicist. And you don't have to be like that. You don't have to be that intelligent to realize if this is what causes it, smoking, physical inactivity, and diets high in fat, what if you did the opposite of that? How hard is that? I mean, really. And yet, here's what they tell us. Because of these risk factors that they're frequently undiagnosed. Now, this is here in the United States. This isn't in India. And by the way, diabetes is even here in the United States is undiagnosed about 25% of the time. So what happens? They tell us this. They do not have the ability to treat these acute conditions. They can't solve the problem. In diabetes, for example, what they're going to tell you is, let's give you this medication, maybe something like metformin or something like that. And then as that progresses on, then you'll end up going to dialysis and then, so they're slowing the process down, but they have no ability. This is their definition telling you they have no ability to treat these conditions. You go to the doctor for these conditions, they'll say, here's your medication and we will manage the symptoms. And that's what the world does. And you say to me, yeah, but Ron, what about hereditary? I mean, it's in my genes. My parents had it, and so I have it. I'm going to have it. Well, I like to explain that to say, it is like having, your genes are like having the gun. But what I'm going to tell you is your lifestyle that pulls that trigger. And we're going to go through this morning and in a very short amount of time, and we're going to look at some of these and see why that is. Now, I'm going to give you a very short testimony about my mother. I believe that testimony is extremely valuable. And I should back up and say that Karen and I now are affiliated with a lifestyle center in Wildwood, Georgia. And what we see is that people that come and do this program, it's an 11-day program, it's a 25-day program, depending on people's needs. What we find is that they often leave with their symptoms either completely gone or reversed or headed well on their ways. And it makes me think, they do the 11 days. It's really 10 days because on the 11th day you're leaving. And it reminds me in the book of Daniel, chapter 1, that was really the first, if you will, health test that we know of that was actually logged. And if you go through and you look at that, you see in the end that they were healthier and they were wiser. It even says their complexion was even better. I mean, it's really remarkable what these laws of health will do. So I'd like to tell you a story about my mom. Now, many years ago, in my mom's late 60s, she was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, okay? And she received a letter from her physician, and this letter says, Miss Lynch, I remember this letter was in green letters. I don't know why it was in green, it was just odd. It says, Miss Lynch, your A1C is 9.7. Anybody here know what your A1C is? Right, that's your 3-month reading of your blood sugar. We were just in Brazil. I told them about the A1C, and I was like, yeah, you know what I'm talking about? They're like, no. And so another physician that was with us told them about it, and they're like, yes, we get it. I said, what did you say? I don't know, because she was speaking in Portuguese, so I don't know what she said. So she tells me, she says, Ron, what I told them was, this is the test you can't cheat on. This is the test that will actually determine and show you, if you take your blood sugar, you can kind of, let's wait 8 hours after I eat or whatever. And so you can kind of manipulate that a little bit if you want. But you can't really manipulate an A1C because it's over a period of 3 months. So my mother's A1C was 9.7, and to be completely non-diabetic, it needs to be 5.6 or less. Now, he went on to say, not only is it 9.7, but you're on the maximum amount of insulin that we can give you. We are looking at, down the road, amputations for you. Now, this got my mom kind of really, how should I say this? Bothered. She didn't want to go down this road. So she says, I would like to do something about that. And about that time, we had a CHIP program come through a church that was about 30 miles from our local church. Has anybody heard of CHIP? Okay. Well, CHIP is going to be based upon the same things that we're talking about here this morning. And so she goes through this program and she follows it thoroughly. 6 months later, on her second A1C reading, it is now 5.6, and she's no longer taking insulin. Praise the Lord, right? I mean, this was good news. She had completely reversed the diabetes. And we see this time and time again at our lifestyle center simply by doing the things that God has asked us to do. Now, do you see this as a message of freedom or a message of bondage from that? This was a message of freedom for her. Now, here's the thing, and this is what I want you to think about while we're talking about this morning. Do we all have choices in what we do in life? You see, my mom had already seen this work. In fact, the neuropathy that she had in her feet had reversed. Things were really looking good for her. But now we were just talking about hereditary. What do you think happened? Let me tell you what happened. My mom decided after about 2 years that she no longer wanted to do this anymore. You see, my mom happened to like fried chicken. My mom happened to like biscuits and gravy. And my mom liked mac and cheese, what we call Southern comfort foods. And she liked a lot of them. Who do you think else likes Southern comfort foods? Standing right here in front of you. I was raised on them. That's part of my genes. Because I was raised with this. This is something that's in my mind. And let me tell you, even after being vegetarian for over 20 years, we were at a conference in Texas, and the gentleman mentioned Kentucky Fried Chicken by name. There was something that clicked in my head, and I could taste it. After 20 years, I could taste, my brain was tasting it. Food is very, very powerful. So for my mom, she's like, I haven't found things that I could do to replace the things that I want. So it was a struggle and a battle for her. So eventually she goes back to her old lifestyle. Do I need to tell you what happened? I mean, our definition is going to tell you what happened, right? She went back to having the diabetes. 2 years after coming back on to having the diabetes, she did the diabetic program. Now she's on dialysis, and 2 years after being on dialysis, she has a massive heart attack and dies. Needlessly, because she'd already reversed it. But you see, this is what I'm going to try to explain to you, my brothers and sisters here this morning, that this is a choice that you have. But, get this, your choice doesn't just affect you. You see, do you think I miss my mom? Of course I miss my mom. I wish she was around so much. But what about my dad? My dad's 96 right now. Sitting there all home alone this morning, wishing that he had someone to sit there and visit with him. And in fact, he kind of does some crazy things, like looks on Craigslist and kind of silly things like that, you know. And I'm like, Dad, these are dangerous things. But he's so needing of a partner, someone who he can talk to right now. So not only did it affect her, it affected me, affected my father. Now, I'm from a Southern family. Do you think there's other people in the family who like, guess what, fried chicken, biscuits and gravy, mac and cheese, and the list goes on, right? Of course. And let me ask you, do you think they're suffering with diabetes? You betcha. What kind of a testimony would she have been if she'd have stayed on that plan and they said, I think we can do this too. We see now it affects the family, but because it affects all these people, actually at the end of the day, guess what? It affects God. You see? So this is extremely important to God because you see, God wants us to be a healthy people. So God has given us laws of health that we could be better equipped with a better mind to serve Him, but also just for our own health and our own enjoyment. God does not wish. Let me ask you this, and I've never brought this up before, but let me ask you this. What was the very first issue that we struggled with back in the Garden of Eden as a human race? It was food, right? We still struggle with it today. Food and our lifestyle. And the devil said, listen, it really doesn't matter what you do. You know. And God says, yes, it does. And the question is, who's right and who's wrong? Now, I'm going to leave you up to decide where it is for you in this balance to find out what's healthy for you. But I'm going to present with you some facts this morning about these that I believe that you will find to be very important. All right. We are told that these laws of health are as important themselves as the 10 Commandments. We find this in a book called Healthy Living, page 18. 21, excuse me. And so it's very important to understand that these laws are, they're. Let me ask you this: are the 10 Commandments, are they for us or against us? They're for us. They're written because we're negatively thinking people. They're written in a negative vernacular, but guess what? They're really for us. You know, if I go out and kill somebody, I mean, the person that I've killed, has that affected somebody negatively? Right? I mean, they're for us. They're not against us. But the question then is, can God protect us if we are disobeying these laws of health? And this is in Healthy Living, page 18, and we're told that God is greatly displeased when we partake and do things that are not in His will. So let's look at what we should do if we get sick. So we're told that in the case of sickness that we should find the cause. I'm going to skip through here just a little bit. So let's talk about the causes of sickness. So the very first thing you need to do, and we talked about this a little bit last night, is you need to find the cause. See, there's a lot of good-meaning church brothers and sisters who want to go out and tell people how to get better, and yet they don't even know the root cause. And how you have a cause, again, is what you do to affect. Last night we talked about, for example, let's just say someone was struggling with like a lung cancer, right? Well, it very well could be that smoking could have caused that issue. But it also may be that they had been working in a factory or something that had asbestos. I mean, there's many different reasons that people get things. So the very first thing that we need to do is find the cause to the problem. So if you're not a professional and you don't know how to find these causes, it's probably best that you don't diagnose this cause, right? You know, that's one of the things in learning and having a health food store that I learned, that we don't treat, people and try to tell them, what's wrong with them, because guess what? We were not trained to do that. And neither are you unless you're a health professional and you actually know what you're doing. So the first thing to do is to find the cause. Then we should change that cause. We should change that habit. I'll give you a good example. I hope I don't step on my wife's toes here for this, for her sister. But, one of the laws of health we're going to talk about is rest. So there's many people that work night shift. And God bless these people because we need them. But you must understand, when you do that, you are sacrificing your body. So when you do that, if you're having an illness and you want to fix that, you have to change that condition. But you say, well, Ron, that's my livelihood. okay, but it's your health, right? I mean, you have to make that decision for yourself. But it's like my wife tells me when I say or do something right. You know, there's a consequence for what you say and do wrong, right? But there's also a benefit for doing the right things. And so, you know, you have to make this decision for yourself. I'm not telling you what you have to do. What I'm telling you is that these things are real. Okay, change these wrong habits. And then we're going to assist nature. And how are we going to assist nature? By expelling the impurities. Now there's different ways that you can do this. One of those is one of the things we're going to talk about this afternoon, which is hydrotherapy. We're not going to be going that deep into hydrotherapy because you can't do it all in 1 hour. But hydrotherapy is a great way of detoxifying the body and helping to expel these impurities. It is a way. And then to reestablish right conditions into the systems. So in other words, what she's saying is exactly what we were talking about back in the definition when we were there, that when we put in the right things, it's going to negate the bad things. Does that make sense? So the laws of health, what are they? Well, I'm going to tell you that this is why I think we get a lot of rub here, because you find first off that they are freely available. Everybody's trying to make a buck, right? And the world, I mean, we have an economy. I mean, you can't live without money. But you know, these laws of health are pretty much, you know, free. I don't know how else to say it other than that. Now, if you go to a lifestyle center or something like that where they have people, of course you're going to pay. But these are things that you can do yourself. I'm going to back up here. Extremely affordable, natural. I mean, they are very given by God. These tools that have that. I didn't think I'd had that up there. Biblical. They are biblical and they are very simple to use. You know, one of the things that I appreciate about this is that, like when we do hydrotherapy today again, I remember going to a church and forgetting my equipment. Well, we just rummaged through the kitchen area and we found the things that we needed in order to do it. This is not something that has to be complicated, although you can have very nice equipment and make things even better. But it is very nice in the fact that it's very simple so that everyone in here can help do these types of things. All right, let's go into nutrition for a few minutes. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." You think that's better than medication? Does anyone here understand that in medications, all medications have what's called an LD50, right? And an LD50 means that when they gave this to a person at this high rate of dose, that they would have a 50% chance of not living. All medications have this side effect. And you'll see when you're watching TV, right? And they got the commercial and they go through all of the negatives on that. Now, having said that, does that mean that I believe that there's never a time or a place for allopathic medicine? Absolutely not. I do believe there's a time and place. If someone's blood sugar is 500 and 600, I'm going to tell them that they should have a whole food plant-based diet, but they should be following their doctor's regimen to help get this under control, to get this stabilized, and then we can work with it from there, you see. So there is a time and a place for medication. Cayenne pepper is great for clotting blood. But if I cut my finger off, I don't want you to hand me a bottle of cayenne pepper. I want to go to the doctor, get it sewed back on, right? You know, there is a time and a place. And I think a lot of people seem to forget that. Like, it's kind of like if you're on our side of the aisle, you know, if you will, so to speak, like there's no place for physicians and doctors. I don't believe that at all. I believe there is that we can be a team, right? And they have knowledge and experience. And again, in diagnosing people, you know, that we don't have. So that's very important to have. However, what we find is that there are a lot of scientific studies out there today that will validate what I'm saying. Has anyone here heard of Dr. T. Colin Campbell? Got any hand raisers yet? Okay, 2. So nobody else has heard Dr. Campbell? 3, okay. Well, Dr. Campbell was a professor at Cornell University, and for 20 years he did a study called the China Study, and then he wrote a book about it. Now, in this study, it was the most exhaustive study done to date on plant-based eating. And what he discovered was that let me explain. Took 20 years to do this research. He did it in 65 countries, and he used 6,500 people. He used over 360, I believe it's 367 variables in here to say what happens if this does this and this does this. And what he concluded out of this was that there's over 8,000 benefits to eating a whole food, plant-based diet. Now, this is a professor at one of the most prestigious Ivy League schools in the United States. And he went on to say, I like this, what he said up here. He says, so where did we get in this point that the people who are profiting off of our sickness are telling us what to eat? I mean, does that make sense? And again, go back to our definition that we had when we first came in this morning that talked about, that our diets was a big part of the problem, right? A diet high in saturated fat. The Adventist Health Study, has anybody here heard of that? Was anybody involved in that? Karen and I was involved. We got a few people, several that was involved in that. And what they found was very similar. And in fact, they went through these diets and so they would start out as someone who, was clean meat eating. Then they had people that would eat just fish. Then they had vegans, and then they had plant-based. And by the way, there is a difference between being a vegan and being whole food plant-based. Are you going to talk about that at all? So I can't steal your thunder, right? In essence, Oreo cookies, they're vegan, right? Did you know that? Oreo cookies are vegan. So if I said to you, I said to you, you can feed your kids Oreo cookies tomorrow morning for breakfast because they're vegan, right? Is that healthy? No. That's not healthy, right? Everybody knows that. Whole food plant-based is going to always give you the nutrition that you need. And so, anyway, I'll let any more on that she wants to talk about when she's doing this, my wife, then that'll be fine. And she's the nutritionist, so I take that and leave that to her. But in these studies, the more you got the plant-based, the more benefit that you found in your diets. And in fact, they found almost a 97% reduction in colon and intestinal cancers if you were plant-based. Pretty much just taking that out of existence. 97% chance you were not going to get it. I like those odds. So if you have a family who suffered with those, this is good news for you this morning. You see, I mean, this is something that you can share with your friends and your neighbors. It's absolutely beautiful. Let's bring this a little closer. COVID-19. It changed our world, didn't it? Well, did you know that whole food plant-based diets actually are shown to be helpful in this? There was an article in the British Medical Journal, and it shared with us basically that, and there's a lot of garble in here, but at the end of the day, it basically is telling us that if you were whole food plant-based diet, that you had a 73% chance of not getting severe to dying with COVID. Did you know that's actually a percent higher than the vaccine rate? If you were a pescatarian, in other words, you just ate fish, I'm not saying just ate fish, but I mean if you added fish to your diet, does that sound better? That you had a 59% chance of not getting severe COVID. You know, people who are struggling, people who have family members that are very, very concerned. These are good statistics. This is freedom, my friends. You know, people are living in fear. And I believe that God's last day remnant people should not have fear. We're told the fruits of the Spirit, the very first three, you know what they are? James 6, love, joy, and peace. Right? God's people, these are identifying marks for God's remnant people. We should not be a church that is fearful. Should we be cautious? Yes. I don't say we go out and we have, go to parties where everybody's got COVID. I don't think that's correct. But we should be able to live in a world and be helpful in a world who is suffering and needs help. The conclusion out of this was, out of these 6 countries, that plant-based diets were severely helpful in helping those that would have high or severe COVID problems. This is just from diet. This is not the other laws of health that we're going to talk about. This is just simply from our diet. So what are some of our nutritional needs? Well, protein is one of these needs that we have. And protein is one of these interesting things where we think that we need more than we actually need. When you get too much protein, your body has to filter this protein. And it takes the calcium out of your body to use it. So we find that you do need protein, but here's the thing. You don't need as much protein as many people think and are told that they need. By the way, did you know that there is more protein in 100 calories of broccoli than there is 100 calories of steak? Did you know that? But think about this. 100 calories of steak is going to be like this, right? And 100 calories of broccoli is going to be like this. So you probably won't eat the 100 calories of broccoli. But you understand the point. So very important to understand that our proteins are important. We still need fats, but we need fats that are good fats. Fats like avocados, coconut, things like this, things that are very good for our bodies, fats that have fibers in them. And we need carbohydrates, a lot of carbohydrates. That should be the bulk. Did you know that fruits are carbohydrates? Fruits. Fresh fruit is carbohydrates. Think about this, and they give you energy. They have the sugar that you need. Fresh fruits are invaluable to a good, healthy diet. And fortunately, we live in a country where we can find these pretty much in abundance most of the year. Karen and I were just blessed to be in Alaska in March of this year, March and April. So she wants to clarify to make sure that I'm technically correct here.
No, you said just. I thought you meant Brazil.
And, we were there for 3 weeks, and there was nothing. The only color that was there was white. When I say that, I'm referring, there was no trees, there was nothing. Everything, it was like being in a snow globe. Everything was just white. It was just snow. There was nothing. The only color you got was whatever people were wearing because they were outside, because there was no plants. I mean, you couldn't see house colors. You couldn't see anything. It was just white. It was just the strangest phenomenon I'd ever seen. And in fact, we go on a lot of mission trips, and I'm usually like, man, this is beautiful. And I love Alaska. I love Alaskan people. But I have no desire to move there at all. I mean, because number one, it was like colder than you can imagine. But it was just white. I mean, there was nothing. I mean, it's just like that got really old in about 30 minutes, And I felt sorry for the people. But they do not have the ability to get fresh fruits and vegetables there as we have here. So it's a bit more of a challenge. But here, we can get these fresh fruits and vegetables, and I find that they are very, very helpful in our diets. Of course, we need minerals, trace minerals, and vitamins and things like that. So let's talk about animals and their nutrition for a few minutes. Of course, you get protein when you eat meat, and so that's something that we need to consider. If you're not going to eat meat, then you need to have a resource. You need to find something different to supplement that protein. But I will tell you that all plant foods have, guess what in it? Protein. So if you're eating abundance of plant foods, you will get enough protein that you need. And it's interesting to me that, but now if you're eating, like if you're snacking on potato chips and things like this, you're probably not going, you could actually not get enough protein that your body requires to operate. But some of the negatives of meat is that they don't have any vitamin C or E, right? They contain no fiber. And see, fiber is very important. Fiber is what kind of like pushes things through. You have like a soluble and an insoluble fiber, and it kind of moves things through the system. This is why, in that statistic that I was telling you, that 97% of plant-based people will not get a colon or intestinal cancer, is because the fiber is pushing the food on through. And if you have the meat in there, that it sits there and it putrefies and causes polyps and these kinds of things. So again, having meat isn't your primary or your best first option for getting protein. Also, in meats that you'll find that they have viruses and bacteria, you know, a little bit more often than you'll find in fresh fruits and vegetables. It does occur. I mean, I remember not long ago that there was an outbreak of cantaloupe that had E. coli in it. I say not long ago, that's been several years, but to me, time is a little bit more, I'm a little bit more, this is why my wife does the scheduling for us, because I would just show up sometime, you know, but she's much better at that than I am. But this is why this is so important. We need a lot of fiber in our body, and meat does not provide that nutrient that we need in order to digest properly. What about some times and volumes of eating? Well, it's said that we should eat 2 to 3 times a day. And you know, it's interesting that I hear a lot of physicians say, today is kind of like a kick, well, you should eat maybe 6 smaller meals for someone who's diabetic. Well, I'm happy to report to you that at our lifestyle center, that unless you really need it, they pretty much are eating 2 meals a day. And people with type 2 diabetes are reversing it on a regular basis. And so, you know, I don't see that that's necessary. But there is a formula for that. You know, if you're going to eat, the best time to eat is breakfast. You're breaking the fast, right? I'm not going to go into a whole lot of that because Karen's going to go into that in pretty good detail tomorrow at the cooking class. By the way, if you had not considered being at this cooking class, I will tell you that you would enjoy that immensely. My wife's very knowledgeable. She's very thorough. And her food tastes pretty good. You can see I haven't, you know, I'm not missing a beat here. I'm not one of these, you know, whole food plant-based people that, you know, good gust of wind will take them away, right? So this, and that was the problem for my mom. She couldn't find good foods that she could replace. And I think this is very important. You need to find foods that you can replace. So breakfast should be your most important meal. And Karen will address that tomorrow, and she'll talk about and make some foods that are very good for breakfast. And I can tell you, they are good. So you don't want to miss that. If you can be here tomorrow between, well, it's 3 and 5, right? You really want to do that. Also, then lunch, you should eat lunch, very nice too, but maybe not quite as much as breakfast. You know, it's interesting. People who are trying to lose weight, you know, they want to cut out supper, right? I mean, rather, they want to cut out breakfast. But if you cut out breakfast, think about this. Going through the day, that's when you burn your calories. When you eat a heavy meal at night, you're not burning those calories, and they're stored and turned to fat. So if you need to lose a few pounds, it's better to eat a larger breakfast and a smaller dinner. Anything else I want to talk? Let's see here. No eating between meals. Of course, that's a hard one for many of us, but the better you can do with that, the best it would be. 5 hours between meals. You know, it's interesting. I want to talk about this a little bit and rest. You know, we often think that when we're eating, or rather when we're going to sleep at night, that our bodies are resting. But if you just ate a heavy meal, your body's still working. We'll talk about that a little bit more in rest. Some general guidelines. Your best, your optimal. This is not something that everybody needs to do, but your best and your optimal. If you'd like to know that, because you know what? For me, knowledge is power. 60 to 70% of your diet, if it was raw, would be very beneficial to you. And in the studies that Karen and I have seen, it is not good to be 100% raw. And the reason for that is, guess what? We need grains, right? And I don't know if anybody in here has tried rice before you've cooked it. It's maybe a bit crunchy. It's a bit crunchy for me, So, obviously, there are some foods that we need to eat that should be cooked. But ideally, your best would be about 60% raw. Chew your food. This was very hard for me. I was once learning that you need to chew your food at least 30 to 40 times. There's some different schools of thoughts out there on how many times you should chew. We have a good friend who'll chew his food every bite that he takes about 200 times. It takes this man a long time to eat a meal. So I decided one day I'd check myself, right? And so I'm checking and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, and I catch myself like swallowing my food like half whole. I've chewed it like 4 times, like I was in the military and I had to eat in 5 minutes. It was crazy. I mean, you should check yourself sometime just to see where you're at in this. You really should chew your food enough to where the saliva starts coming out and starts, because it's starting that digestive process even before it gets to your stomach. To me, it's very important to be able to replace foods, okay? And so what are some foods that we can replace? By the way, does everyone have now the 8 doctors? Has everyone got that? Because we've had several people come in since we've started. We have a handout. And so this afternoon or whatever, because time is short as we're speaking here this morning, if you want to, if you need to have questions or whatever, I'll be happy to answer those anytime, because we're going to be here almost all afternoon, so we'll answer any questions like that you have. And chocolate. Chocolate's something that needs to be replaced. Chocolate is very high in antioxidants, but it's also extremely high in caffeine and theobromine. Did you know that caffeine is the #1 abused drug around the world? And there's more caffeine in 2 ounces of chocolate than there is in like a Coca-Cola. So, and a lot of people don't realize that. So what's something you can replace chocolate with? Well, something that Karen and I love is carob. Are you doing a carob recipe tomorrow? Oh, dog, you guys are going to miss it, because I'm going to tell you what. I won't tell you. I know an Adventist TV personality who's a pastor, and his wife says he does not like carob. And someone, in fact, had made him a carob cake for his birthday, and he kind of snubbed it. But she made her carob. It was just like a carob bar. You sure you're not making that? I'm sorry, guys. Listen, I apologize for you. That's okay, because I usually get more when she makes it. Anyway, but carob has no caffeine in it and can be made to be very tasty. Anybody in here tried carob other than me? I mean, we got some carob eaters. It can be good, right? Teas we can replace with herbal teas. Again, caffeine, coffee with caffeine. They make things like, what's the name of the Postone? What's that? Roma's the one I was thinking of. But there are cereal coffees that can taste the same. Milk. You got soy or nut milks. I mean, now one of my favorites, I don't know if you guys have tried this or not, oat milk. I mean, really, really good. I mean, there are varieties. I don't know if there's any old schoolers in here who tried to be plant-based for many years. My wife and I, there was a product, I don't know how many years ago, it's called Soygen. And it was like the most disgusting thing you ever put in your mouth. I mean, nobody wanted it. I see somebody laughing, you must have tried it. I mean, it was just bad stuff. I mean, and so it would turn you away. I could understand if these were the options that my mom had, why she had this struggle. But today, in today's society, we have foods that are very tasty on the meat alternatives. Your meat alternatives, though, I think you should be careful with this, because many of your meat alternatives also are fiberless, and sometimes they have dyes and things in them. They're not extremely healthy. So kind of be conscious of that and how you're doing that. Also, a lot of times, a lot of the meat substitutes, and I have no time to go through this at all, but they're made genetically modified bases, and so therefore are maybe as harmful or even worse for you than some other things. But meat alternatives can be really good too. Karen makes some great meat alternatives. Fresh fruits, also very, very important. Let's talk about exercise. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. I'm doing a health nugget this morning, which I'm going to be talking about exercise. So that's going to be, I think, very valuable for you. But exercise is extremely important to us. It is something that, we can include many of the laws of health at the same time while we're doing it. Again, I'm going to skip over this a little bit because I'm going to be talking about that this afternoon. But, we're told a brisk walk actually helps every organ of the body. So it is very, very helpful. Now, people say, well, what's the best exercise? And I have to agree with Karen on this. I think it's the one that you'll do. Find something that you enjoy doing and go with that. But walking is extremely, extremely important. I'm going to share that with you today, and I'm going to share with you something that you may not have heard of before about how it is very helpful for type 2 diabetes. It's really amazing. Water. Let's talk about water for a minute. I got a picture here of a bunch of dirty dishes in a sink. Now just imagine with me, if you will, that you have a half a cup of water. Do you think that you can adequately clean these dishes with that amount of water? No, right? Well, it's the same way with us. You see, we are made of mostly water. And so if we don't have the right amount of water, we're not actually helping ourselves. And in fact, we talked about hydrotherapy and how it was good for, helping with getting for detoxification. Water is also the internal water, the water that we drink, is also good for helping for detoxing. And it's interesting to me, I'll probably steal a little bit of my own thunder for this afternoon because I don't know if everybody will be there or not. But there are signs for when you're chronically dehydrated, and about 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated. So let's say in this room right now, maybe 15 people are not dehydrated and the rest of you are. When you're chronically dehydrated, you actually lose your thirst mechanism. It doesn't work properly at this point, so you don't even know if you're thirsty. I can tell right now I'm thirsty. My grandfather used to do this thing where he'd take his skin and he'd pinch it like this, and it would just stay up like this. As a kid, I thought that was the most amazing thing. I was like, this is cool. I had no idea that was one of the signs that you can test for dehydration. I didn't know that. I did not understand he was completely dehydrated. But water helps us with many, many different functions. I've got only about 5 minutes. I'm really going to have to hurry. I was thinking I had 11. So I got to really pick this together, don't I? Okay. Water is very good for helping us to regulate our body temperature. It is good for purification. It helps to get the electric to the neurons. It's very good for a lot of different things. But I got 4 minutes, so I'm going to have to hurry right along. Sunlight. Sunlight's where we get our vitamin D. Did you know that the sun is the best germicide that you can get? And so, many years ago, it used to be, that people would have, when you got a cold, they'd send you to a room, close the curtains and all like this. Well, that wasn't probably the best plan for us. When Karen and I, back in 2020, when we got COVID, we drug ourselves outside. We said, we're going to get that vitamin D, which it is really amazing. In fact, there's a study about vitamin D and COVID, talking about that. And basically, in the short of this, just like with our diets, that we found that people that had a low hydroxy vitamin D level were going to have a much higher rate in having, morbidity or severe COVID as well. So vitamin D is very, very helpful as well for COVID. So you tag that along with your exercise and your good nutrition. hopefully you'll stand a very high percentage chance of not being severe. It doesn't mean you don't catch COVID. It just means that you're not going to be very severe with it. What is temperance? Temperance is abstaining from the things that are harmful to us, but also in being very balanced in the things that are even good for us. So what are some things? Oh, I wanted to just mention before I go on to here, just briefly, a small study about vitamin D. Brigham Young University did a study where they had 16,000 students, and what they did was they tested them on daylight savings time. What they discovered, these 16,000 people, that after just losing the sun for 1 hour, starting showing signs of depression. And I'm like, I didn't need a study to tell me that. My wife will tell you, when we crossed the border to Florida, I don't know, maybe it's mental, I don't know, but it's the Sunshine State, even though there's more sunshine in other states than Florida, because they call it the Sunshine State, and you get down there, personally, I've just become a happy man. Alaska was hard on me because, I needed that extra sunlight, Sunlight's very important. Now, anyway, so I digress back to here. Things that are harmful, obviously, tobacco and alcohol, coffee and tea, anything with the caffeine that we talked about earlier. Refined white sugar, I wish I could go into that. I don't have time for that. Anything done excessively, even religious work can be done excessively. So we have to be able to find balance and moderation. And even tight clothing and stuff like that can be an issue. And too much or too little clothes. These are things that oftentimes people don't think about, but that can actually be, harmful to our bodies. God tells us that it's impossible for an intemperate man to be a Christian because his powers are being held back. It's almost like he's being enslaved to something. And it is true. When the story with my mom, my mom was enslaved to her diet. And if she could have found and kept that diet that would have made her happy, I believe that she'd have still been with us here today, because that was the underlying issue that was killing her. Negative ions, talking about air. Who here has heard of negative ions? Hey, now I got some hands. Good job. You guys have heard about negative ions. Negative ions are very, very important for us. They are actually, that they help lift the villi in your intestinal tract back up. So they're good for people who have had issues with smoking. Where do you find these things? Well, you find that they are like in moving particles around, like with moving water, lightning, things of this nature. So, we were just at Port Sanilac in Michigan. I got to stay at this house, and it was right on the lake, and the waves were coming crashing in. You can smell it. When you go to the ocean, and oh man, it smells good. That's your negative ions, and it's like a mood enhancer, right? I keep looking at this screen back here, thinking it's going to change with me, and it never does, of course. The only thing I want to say about air, in this sense, we're moving along so quick right now, is I'm not a tree hugger by no means. But trees are very important. One tree will make enough oxygen, a mature tree, to keep two people alive for a year. So I tell people, listen, if you feel like you need some more, go plant a tree. Sleep with your window open at night too, a little bit. Well, if you're in town, probably not so much, but if you're out and about a little bit in the country, getting some fresh air is very helpful. Rest. Rest is one of the most important things that we do. I'm going to have to skip through some of this, but this is when your body does its repair work to your body. So like we were talking about earlier, when you're eating a late dinner, if you're eating at 10, say, and it takes you 5 hours to digest that, when is your body going to bed? 10, 11, 12, 1, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you see? And so you're not getting that proper rest that you need. But did you know that there is a special Sabbath rest? And studies have shown us, this is pretty cool, that on the Sabbath day, the heart beats slower. This is pretty amazing. And it doesn't matter whether you're working or not working. It doesn't matter what religion you are. Your heart actually rests on the Sabbath day. Very interesting study by Dr. Pauline Gunther. And if you can't sleep, there's several things you can do since we got to pass through this. If you have some issues with sleep and insomnia, talk to either Karen and I later today. We will share that with you. And our last health nugget that I'd like to talk about is trust in God. And I'm going to tell you, this is the most important one. You see, all of these things are things that we're looking at doing. But I believe, back to our original talk this morning, that God is the one who provides the miracle. God is the great physician. He gives us these tools that we can use. But it is our trust in God, allowing Him to work these miracles in our lives, that we can share with others. See, you are a great testimony to all of those around you. And when you have trust in God, you won't have these fears that many people deal with, like anxiety, stress, anger. These are things that people who are not trusting in God, these are those side effects. So trusting in God is of valuable importance. And so to close this up, I'd like to tell you this, that our health is a choice and not a chance. And I use this picture here of a fighter. And let me tell you, if you're a fighter, if you're an athlete of any kind, you're looking for the advantage. And so that's what these 8 laws of health do. They give you that advantage. Every one that you implement gives you a better advantage. And so it's like this, when you want to finish this race and you're struggling, your friends are struggling, the ones who are suffering with diabetes, the ones who are suffering with all these diseases. And we're sitting here and we have information that can help these people. As one gentleman said, he said, it's a shame that you guys have this information and you're not sharing this with the world. And we need to be sharing this with the world. But it's through your personal testimonies, your own, when you have tried this and you've tasted and you have seen that this health message is a beautiful thing that helps people. It's not a message of bondage. It's not a message of don'ts. This is a message of God says, I want you to be the best you can be. And so with that in mind this morning, let's close our head and ask God to be with us. Heavenly Father, I thank you this morning for your many blessings. I'm sorry that I did not get to cover all the information as well as I would have liked to, but Heavenly Father, I pray for those who are out there that may have some questions, some interest, Heavenly Father, that they will feel free to approach Karen or I this afternoon, and that we can share this beautiful message that you have given us, this message of love. We know, Heavenly Father, that you want us to be healthy, that you want us to prosper. Heavenly Father, we just pray that you will open our eyes that we can see this more clearly. For we ask this in the blessed and the loving name of Jesus. Amen.